Hello and welcome to Ray of Light, a new podcast all about writing, reading and happiness with myself, Eleanor Ray. I write books that are about finding light in dark times and the strength in vulnerability. It's uplifting book club fiction. This episode, I'm thrilled to welcome Annie Garthwaite. Annie is the acclaimed author of 2 novels that bring the women of the War of the Roses to life. Cecily, her first, was named a top pick by The Times and The Sunday Times, a best book of 2021 by independent bookshops and Waterstones, and has recently been optioned for television. The King's Mother was named Book of the Month by The Times immediately upon publication, and I've just read it and absolutely loved it. So thank you so much, Annie, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. And thank you so much for reading The King's Mum.
I read it on holiday and I just enjoyed it so much. And I love it when I learn things from a book, as well as just enjoying the story. Can you tell us a little bit more about the books and the inspiration behind them?
Usually when you read about the Wars of the Roses, you're reading about the blokes, right? And
you are.
Don't get me wrong, the blokes are great. And they're the ones who are wandering around with swords, biffing each other. But the women of the Wars of the Roses are just absolutely fascinating. And they have been my abiding interest since I was a teenager. And I just wanted to tell the story of the Wars of the Roses from their point of view. The problem is we've been sold a pop, really, about women in the Middle Ages, particularly aristocratic women. We're led to think that they spent all of their times doing their tapestry or playing the lute and waiting for a knight in shining armor to come along, and that was their destiny. And they had no power and no agency or no influence on politics or events. But that's a complete and utter nonsense. They were political animals juggling work and family, and for family, perhaps read dynasty in exactly the same way that we do now. So I really wanted to tell that story, the story of the Wars of the Roses from their point of view. And when you put the women back in the center of the story changes in ways that
does
expect. Yeah.
Really does. And I really enjoyed that aspect of your books, that female perspective and that feminist kind of view. And it's a trend now. And I think it's a trend that's long overdue. What do you find the challenges of writing that kind of a book?
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And I would say it's changed very much over my lifetime. I mean, as I mentioned, I got interested in these women in my teens, which is quite a long time ago now.
A couple of years.
And then history was very much a male affair. And I'm glad to say that now that is changing. And I think in the last 15, 20 years, there's been a sort of new generation of young female historians, people like Helen Carr and Helen Castor and Janina Ramirez, Nicola Tallis, who are bringing the women back into the history and back to the forefront of history. And that's making it so much easier for novelists to do research.
And now I understand that you spend 2 years roughly researching a book before you write. And when I first heard that, I thought, that's not true. She's just spending 2 years relaxing and chilling, maybe visit the odd castle. But then I read The King's Mother and I thought, actually, yes, this will take 2 years. This will take a long time. How do you go about it? What do you do?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, Eleanor, researching Cecily and The King's Mother, I think 40 years.
Because and a life's work.
Yeah, but 2 years of intensive research before I actually sat down to write the first book. And to explain that a little bit, I fell in love with the Wars of the Roses and these women when I was a teenager in school. I had a really eccentric history teacher, and he was teaching the Wars of the Roses. And he just captured my imagination. And at that time, I was interested in the blokes. I was interested in Richard III and Edward IV, and particularly Richard III. Was he really the sort of hunchback tyrant that Shakespeare gives us, or was he a nice guy who got a bad press? But as I got into my early 20s, I got much more interested in the women and my attention switched to them. So really early in my life, this decision to write a novel about the women of the Wars of the Roses was formed in my late teens, early 20s. And I promised myself, when I left university, I promised myself that when I was 55, I would give up the day job and write these novels. And that's exactly what I did. So
I love that. I love the conviction. You just went for it. That's fantastic. I did it in a wimpier way. I would work my day job during the day and then I'd come home and have an hour or so where I'd write. And then that way I slowly built up my first book. And then I wrote on maternity leave with my kids. And then it wasn't until I had the publishing deal that I quit my job and was like, right, I'm gonna do this full time. But I love your way. It's fantastic.
But there's no right and wrong way, is it? I mean, I look
Exactly.
at people who manage to balance writing with full-time jobs, and I'm full of admiration because I don't know how you do it. Yeah.
So you quit your job, closed your business, did your creative writing MA. How did it feel when you finished your book and then you got that book deal?
Oh, it was extraordinary because after all that long wait, everything happened in a rush.
Wow.
So I finished the MA in sort of summer of 2019, and I had a finished manuscript ready to send out to agents that September. So I started sending it out to agents and got the usual raft of thanks, but no thanks. But then signed with an agent literally about 3 days before Christmas, which meant there was a lot of champagne drunk that Christmas. It was a really good Christmas. And then it was sent out on submission straight away in the new year. And I signed a deal with Penguin in March, like a week before the whole COVID thing exploded. After waiting so long, it was like, boom, boom, boom.
So I wanted to ask you about the process of writing itself. What do you enjoy the most? What do you love the most about your whole process from the research through to getting it out into the world? What brings you the most joy?
Oh, there's a couple of things really. When you write and you write and you write for days and it just isn't quite working, or it's okay, but it's not brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day you'll just write a perfect sentence or a sentence that you are truly happy with. And that buzz is just great. But you paid the price for it in all of the hours that you spend. Oh, no, that's just not quite right. That's not quite it. And then suddenly it is it. And
so it's the joy in the little things, like something as small as getting a sentence exactly right.
Yeah,
Will bring you a load of joy. Fantastic.
And then I think at the other end of it, it's the getting out and talking about the books that I absolutely just love. You spend months and months and months on your own, locked to the desk and the computer, writing. And then suddenly it's out in the world and you get to go out and talk to people about it. And that is, for me, an absolutely profound joy.
And that's been a theme in the earlier podcast episodes as well. A lot of writers have said they love the joy of writing, but then reader feedback and reader interactions and people getting in touch with them, whether it's on social, whether it's by email, whether it's at events, to say something they've written has really touched them, has just been the most amazing experience. Because I think we all write these books not really knowing whether anyone will read them or not, certainly wondering whether anyone might enjoy them. So to find out people have, it's just the best feeling, isn't it? It's amazing.
And that must happen to you all the time because you write books about people finding joy in dark times. And that is something that people need, especially now when the times
I think so.
The dark.
I think so. It's funny, every time they are about finding joy in dark times. And people always say, especially now, especially now, especially now. I think since I've started writing them through to now, it's always a dark time, which is sad. And that's why I think it's always important to find the light in the darkness, to find that joy in things, acknowledge the darkness, go into it, explore what it means, but then with always a sense of something better's coming. There's a way to heal through all of this. And that's something I try and do in all of my books. And that's something I've had lovely feedback from people, especially Everything is Beautiful, actually, which is my first novel. It's about a hoarder who's so surrounded by her belongings that she can't properly live. She doesn't have space for herself. And it's because her best friend, her boyfriend, disappeared years ago. And so she keeps things that remind her of them, mugs especially. She'll keep towers and towers of mugs just because she remembers those happy times drinking tea together. That was something that really resonated with people, actually. I was surprised how many people said, I'm not a full on hoarder, but I do hoard. I cling to all these things that I feel I shouldn't. And some people said, oh, I'm clearing out. And other people said, actually, I'm acknowledging that I collect these things because to me they are beautiful. And I thought that was lovely. And if things make us happy, then keep them. But if it gets to a point where it doesn't anymore, let it go, because we all want to be happy. That's why we're listening to this podcast.
Yeah, it's what we strive for, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. So we've spoken about which part of the writing brings you the most joy. What's the hardest part? And how do you get through it? We're going to go dark and then we're going to go light again. How do you get through the hard aspects of your writing?
I think I'm wrestling with that now in some ways, to be honest with you. Because when I came to the end of The King's Mother, I thought, well, is that it then? Because for all those years, I hadn't been thinking to myself, oh, when I'm 55, I'm going to become a novelist. I've been thinking, when I'm 55, I'm going to write this story. So that was the goal. And so once The King's Mother was done, and I told the story of the women of the Wars of the Roses, I thought, oh, am I done then? Is that it?
Yes.
Am I finished? And then my editor asked me if I had an idea for a third book, and I kind of had. And I, to my surprise, found myself telling her about it. And she said, oh, well, we'll commission that right now.
See?
And it's another fascinating historical woman, but it's in a period of history, 100 or so years before the Wars of the Roses, which I knew a bit about, but not in anything like the detail I knew the Wars of the Roses. And I certainly hadn't spent 40 years thinking about it. So I have literally spent 2 years just researching the new book. And I am now writing. I'm several thousand words in, about 20,000 words in at the moment. So I am writing. But it has been so much harder than I expected it to be. And I think now I know why. It's because by the time I sat down to write Cecily and the King's Mother, I had a very clear view in my head about who these people were and what their motivations were. Beyond the detail of the history, the details of their characters and their motivations and their beliefs and their driving forces and what it was that made them do the things that they did. And it's taken me a long, long time to decide those things for the characters in my new book. And that has been really hard. You get plagued by self-doubt, don't you? I think every writer does. You've got this little gremlin that sits on your shoulder and says, oh, just because you can write one book, it doesn't mean you can write another one, you know. So, yes, I'm very relieved that I am now in the next phase where I am actually writing the book, and that research and questioning phase is just about behind me. But I know I'll be an awful lot happier when it's finished.
It's difficult, isn't it? I always find that's why I'm so impressed with how long you spend doing the research, because if I'm not adding words to the page every day, I feel like I'm not getting anything done. You do some research, but it's like, no, what I'm trying to do is get a book written here. I want it to be all adding up. So yeah, it's impressive that you do all that research first. But I suppose that's where your stories come from. You need to do that. It's essential for you in a way it isn't for some modern fiction writers.
Yeah. And also looking back, and particularly with this new book, the characters in it do some things that are just seem incomprehensible. So trying to get inside their heads and think through and arrive at their character is really hard. And one thing that I do as part of my research is sit down from time to time with clinical psychologists.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, and try and build a kind of psychological profile for some of my characters, particularly for some of the more bonkers ones.
Ask you about that actually, because how do you? Because when I do my writing, I make my characters up. There's a bit of me in them all. There's a bit of various people that I know, but it's up to me what they do and how they behave, and I can make it all make sense from my imagination. Whereas you're dealing with real facts of things they've done. How do you get inside the heads of those historical characters? So
Yeah.
you talk to a clinical psychologist? How interesting.
Yeah, I've done that with several of my characters, and particularly characters that you'll have met in The King's Mother, like Richard III and
Yes.
his brother George, Duke of Clarence, Crazy George.
Yes.
What is it with that guy?
Yeah, they're all over the place. The allegiance is changing. Yeah. It makes it a brilliant story. But I imagine getting inside their heads and making it seem believable it's a tough old job.
Really hard. Because also the other challenge I think about writing good historical fiction, well, there's two, I suppose. And the first one is that for me, I feel a real commitment to the history. I don't want to make it up. If we know that certain things happened in a certain way at a certain time, then let's not pretend they didn't. You do get some writers who play a bit fast and loose with historical fact. And I'm really committed to not doing that. But happily, there's so much about the 15th century that we either really don't know or where there are conflicting reports and opinions about what might have happened and who was involved. So there's lots of room, there's lots of scope. So that's the first thing that I find really difficult. And the other thing that I found really challenging was that I wanted these women in Cecily and the King's Mother to be authentically 15th century, not modern women in fancy dress. You sometimes read historical fiction and you feel that the characters are just like we are, but they've just got much better frocks. And I wanted to create women who felt authentically 15th century, i.e., not like us at all in so many ways. Catholic, pre-feminist, dynastic, matriarchal, with a medieval mindset and a medieval set of beliefs. But I also wanted for readers in the 21st century to be able to relate to them and understand them and not find their historical context alienating. And that, I think the only way then is to really tap into the humanity that we all share. We as 21st women love, our partners or our children or whomever. Well, so did they. We as 21st century women are ambitious for ourselves and for our families and for our careers. Well, so were they. So it's tapping into those very basic human instincts, which might manifest slightly differently in the 15th century to the 21st. But oh my God, we recognize them when we see them.
Well, I love that. You're giving me goosebumps thinking about it, because I think what you're doing here is looking at what's cultural and what's universal. What's the essence of who we are? And those are the things that you can tap across any historical time period. And I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. And you do it so well in the books.
Oh, thank you. I mean,
really do.
One of the things where it's most obvious, I think, I spent a lot of time speaking to people, historians and female friends, about motherhood and childbirth. Because in the 15th century, women typically had a lot of babies and lost a lot of babies.
Yes.
Infant mortality was insanely high, even amongst the upper classes. And so was maternal mortality as well. Women died in childbirth all the time. And I found myself thinking, did women feel it less then, the loss of a child, because it was so common, it was almost expected? Did they feel it less than we would now? Because when a mother loses a child today, it is an utter devastation.
It's devastating, yes.
And the conclusion I came to is that they don't feel it any differently at all. They felt it every bit as intensely as we would now. I mean, Cecily herself, she had 12 children with Richard, Duke of York. 5 of them died in infancy. No, 5. 5.
5. I wanted to ask you about another of her children, which is Richard. Now, he's traditionally painted as one of history's villains. Even I, who knew before reading your books very little about the War of the Roses, I knew about the Princes in the Tower. And I'm not going to give anything away, but you give him a more sympathetic treatment. Why was that? I thought, is it for dramatic purposes? But speaking to you now, I think it's not. Do you believe in his innocence, and why? Can you tell me a little bit more about that character who you treated so differently to how we traditionally see him?
Yes, I think Richard III is the victim of Tudor propaganda. The image of Richard III that you have is the image that Shakespeare gave us, which in turn draws on historical writers like Thomas More and so on. And in those accounts, Richard is a hunchback, a cripple with a twisted arm. He's hideous. He manifests physically the wickedness of his heart, all that kind of stuff. Well, in 2012, we dug up his body and we found that he didn't have a hunchback or a twisted arm or a gimpy leg or anything else.
Interesting.
So if that's not true, what else isn't true about him that we've all been told in school? His body was found to have a scoliosis of the spine, which is a sideways bend to the spine, not a hunch. And speaking with doctors and so on about Richard's scoliosis, it would have been totally invisible when he was dressed. Most people, if they think about Richard III at all, they think about those fateful events, those few weeks in the summer of 1483, when a few things happen in short order. His brother, King Edward IV, dies. He leaves Richard as protector to his 2 young sons. Richard brings them to London. The eldest is due to be crowned. He's in the Tower awaiting his coronation, which was not a prison, it was a royal palace. Then suddenly it's announced that those 2 boys are bastards. They appear to disappear, and suddenly Richard's sitting on the throne of England. And you think, oh,
suspicious.
Yeah. Oh, he looks a bit like a usurper, And that might be the conclusion you reach. Lots of historians have. But if you look at, all I would say is look at Richard's life before that summer and see what you think. Because when you look at his life as Duke of Gloucester, as Lord of the North, as the king's loyal brother, you don't see a child murdering tyrant. You see a guy who is unfailingly loyal to Edward IV.
When most people weren't as well.
Oh, yeah. His brother George certainly was.
Yes.
Unfailingly loyal, even when that loyalty put him in grave personal danger. You see something of a legal reformer. So, this idea that is central to English law even now, that until you're proven guilty, you're innocent. Well, you have Richard III to thank for that. He introduced that in his first parliament in 1483. So you see a very different guy. He introduced a very early form of legal aid because he's, if a guy's got a case in law and he can't afford to bring it, well, we should help with that, right?
Yes.
And when it comes to the Princes in the Tower, the truth is, Eleanor, there is no evidence at all that those boys were murdered by Richard III or that they were murdered at all. And there's a growing body of evidence emerging now to show that they survived well beyond Richard's death, and that the 2 Tudor the pretenders who came against Henry VII's throne in the late 1480s and 1490s were the sons of Edward IV.
Lambert Simnel and Perkin Warbeck, yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
interesting.
And, very, very compelling evidence.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a silver bullet? Can I put my hand on my heart and say it is a 100% proven fact that those boys did not die in the summer of 1483? Well, probably I can't. But if you put all of the new evidence on a scale against the non-existent evidence that Richard murdered them.
Yes. Oh, it's so interesting.
It's fascinating.
So, moving away from a minute from your books, can you tell me about another book that you've read that you absolutely love? Maybe something that isn't a bestseller yet that you'd love for more people to discover.
Well, I will tell you, it's by a woman called Flora Carr, and it's called The Tower. And it's about the first year of Mary, Queen of Scots' imprisonment after she loses the throne of Scotland. And I remember talking to Flora about it, and I said, gosh, well, if my book is a book about how women exercise power, yours is a book about what happens to women when they lose it. And
that's so interesting.
And it's just fascinating. And she puts Mary in this small group of women who are her companions. And she puts them in a very small, imprisoned space and just lets their characters emerge. It's a superb piece of writing. I absolutely love it. It's really great.
Great, brilliant. Oh, that sounds fantastic. It sounds really claustrophobic and interesting and wonderful.
Oh, yeah, and juicy.
Yes.
It's just great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Now, I ask everyone this. Do you have any tips for aspiring authors? If there's anyone listening who's got a book inside them, haven't quite got it out yet, what would you say? What advice would you give?
The best way to become a writer is to read. Mm-hmm. Read incessantly, read constantly, read widely. And you will think that's not helping you, but you will be quietly and carefully learning your craft. And that doesn't mean copy other writers. It means just imbibe all of that experience and skill that writers have. And then when you're ready, make a start and just keep going. Don't give up. You know, it's so easy to think, it's so easy to get downhearted, isn't it? And we all as writers, I think, have moments when we feel downhearted. And the only way to get to be a good writer is to keep on writing even when you're a bad writer.
Yes, it's much easier to edit what you've got, I think, than to have nothing. And I always say, in these days, we're not carving our words out of stone. We're writing them on paper or putting them into a laptop. Everything can change, but it's so much better when you've got something down. So I always say, even if you don't feel inspired or you don't think what you're writing is any good, write it anyway. And you can always fix it later. Or you might read it back and think, actually, you know what? I was being too critical of myself. This is good.
It's better than I thought it was.
Yes, yes.
And the more you write, the better you'll get.
Yes.
You know, and be self-critical and go over work over and over and over again.
So, Annie, you have been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much to you for sharing all of that. You've certainly changed my view of that period of history. I can't wait to see what you've got coming up next. What period is it? Can you tell us a little bit about what you've got coming up?
It's the early 14th century, and it's about Isabella, who was a French woman who came to England when she was 12 to marry Edward II. He was King of England, but possibly the worst king England has ever had. And he was the first English king ever to be deposed. And it was his wife, Isabella, who did it.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. That sounds so amazing.
So don't ever let anyone tell you medieval women didn't do anything.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you to Annie, and thank to all of you for listening as well. So Cecily, Annie's first novel, and The King's Mother, the sequel, are both available now, and we'll have to wait for the next one, which sounds brilliant. So if you've enjoyed Ray of Light, please do like and subscribe for more. You can find me at Eleanor Ray Books across Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. So please do reach out to me there to let me know your thoughts. And if you've liked what you've heard today, you might like what I write too. It's uplifting book club fiction, stories like Everything is Beautiful and See the Stars that spark deep conversations and find hope in the unexpected. See you next time for more tips on writing, reading, and happiness.